Well, we're in conversation now with Professor Bruce Alberts, past president of the National Academy of Sciences and current editor of Science magazine. Professor, a very warm welcome, and thank you for joining us. Your big passion is growing and nurturing young scientists. I would suggest to you, in a developing economy like South Africa, that debate is absolutely critical. But our problem here is we don't have enough of them.
Well, I agree. Most countries don't have enough of them. And the issue gets down to how we nurture them starting as very young children, because the way we teach in schools often is antithetical to science. We teach people to memorize and learn what the right answers are. In fact, you'd like scientists and all citizens to have an inquiring mind, and you'd like school to be about learning how to figure out the right answers and realizing for many important questions there is no right answer. And so I've been working very hard in the United States to change the definition of what we even mean by science education, because too often we mean by science education young kids, even starting at age 6, memorizing six or 10 different kinds of plants, or memorizing 30 different whales. I would, that may be fun for a while, but it has nothing to do really with science. The new kinds of science education, we want kids to actively engage in the kind of problem solving that scientists do. And we know how to do this. I mean, even 5-year-old children could do this given the right kind of guide.
You say to me, we don't have enough of them worldwide. Why is that?
Well, there are many other professions that are attractive. If you're a scientist, you're not going to make a fortune. It's not the kind of enterprise that parents push their successful children into often. I mean, my parents wanted me to be a doctor, and so I got excited about science, and I decided I'd do science instead. And in fact, most children never really get any way of knowing what science is, or that there is a career like science. And so this is something we can change very easily.
I want to get in a moment or two to some of the priorities ahead of this Rio summit, but just to put a cap on this particular discussion, what role, enabling role, then does the private sector, do business leaders have in promoting science education? And are they doing enough?
Well, they talk about it.
They
say it's important, but I don't know about the South African business community. I can tell you about the U.S. business community.
I sense it's probably the same.
I've been working with them for years. They always want, more science education, better science education, but they haven't done their homework. They don't know what better is. And when there are political debates, as we have in the United States periodically, about what kind of science standards we should have, they often don't take any sides, even though their own interests are to learn, to have the science education taught that teaches kids how to think. U.S. industry now says that they can't find people to hire for 600,000 jobs when we have 8% unemployment. There are not enough U.S. citizens graduating from high school with the kind of analytical, technical skills that industry needs to work on a shop floor. And yet, my frustration is that I've never been able to get them to see that the kind of science education I'm talking about directly fulfills their needs. So they should be pushing for that kind of science education, not for the kind of science education where you fill in the blanks, get the right number of words, and you get a high grade.
Give us a couple of views, if you can, on this Rio summit. My sense is that this could very well end up being a lot of talk and little action, much like COP17 in Durban at the end of 2011.
Well, of course, because that's what we've seen recently. I think the real problem is that governments are not going to act until their people understand more about what's at stake here. The natural tendency of us all, especially of politicians who are only going to be there 2 years or 4 years before the next election, are to try to do something that looks good in the short term. This is a terrible situation we're in, because if we only do short-term decision-making, we end up long-term with an overheated planet and no resources.
But surely at this point the world understands what is at stake, short-termism or not. It's absolutely critical that summits like this actually get something meaningful done.
I agree, but politicians. I'm talking about the United States. I think they're trying to even deny that climate change is a problem. The entire Republican Party, for example, apparently is going to take a position that climate change is an unproved theory.
Which sets the debate back 10 or 15
Exactly. So, I mean, why? Well, it's inconvenient to make the kind of decisions that, need to be made. And they'll argue that, if we're not absolutely certain that climate change is going to happen, we shouldn't do anything. In fact, scientists at our academy have done repeated studies. The scientific consensus is that we're 95% certain that this climate is going to warm in major ways that are harmful. And so if somebody told you that there's 95% chance that your house is going to burn down, you'd do something about it.
So how does the debate say in terms of energy need to change at this upcoming event? What fresh thinking, what fresh ideas, what fresh resolutions need to emerge?
Well, the low-hanging fruit is conservation. I mean, in the United States, for example, changing, getting away from incandescent bulbs, so that they become illegal. We have developing new kinds of light bulbs that.
But low-hanging fruit is easy. What about the rest of the tree?
Well, it's not easy because we have nobody wants to change anything. Even that is not easy. And so I mean, driving different kinds of cars, public transportation. There are all these things. These do not, in my mind, represent sacrifices on the part of Americans of any significant kind. But the fact is, politicians get people to vote for them by protecting them from any change.
Politics would be so much easier without politicians. Professor Alberts, thank you very much for talking to us.
Thank you.